Greetings to Say You, and I am James J. Sakino. I'm doing some live broadcasts here on Say You as they keep me over here in the goulash, internet goulash. So I'm now broadcasting at Say You. As you guys all know, I was over there on 60 News Talk, and I've been put on hold by YouTube because of putting war footage, the same one everybody else is putting. And it wasn't even bad. It wasn't like killing or anything. No, it was just actually a helicopter flying, some helicopters flying, some planes flying, and I think it was even some trucks. That's it. No people, nobody, and some people talking in Russian. And everybody else who's anybody is posting stuff to do with was war footage. And I'm the one who gets slammed for hang on a second. I want to see. I want to check. I got to check something out. Hang on one sec. There you go. Okay. And I'm the one who's actually getting slammed by YouTube, and they give me a strike, and there's no copyright material on it because it comes from a war zone. Okay, if you think about it, who in the heck is going to claim copyright there? We can't even get communication out of the country. Only the government can. So there's nothing about that, and also under the Fair Act uses under U.S. laws, it's fair. It's fair to use because it is coming out of a war zone. It is footage from a war zone, and it is no copyright on that thing. All right, so what the hell did they get me on? What was it that they pinned me on? I think they just wanted to keep me off the air. They don't want my commentary out here, so I can get you to think out of the box. They really don't want you. They don't want you messing with that part. They don't want you thinking about that. So anyway, here we are. We're doing a live broadcast today here on Monday. It's March already. Wow, the year has gone by like in 10 seconds. But some developing news there coming out of Russia, and some of it is actually a little bit scary what they're pushing Russia into, and I think it's just going to get more berserker over there in Ukraine. And before I talk a little bit about this convoy that is developing outside Kiev in Ukraine, I'm going to talk about what they're doing, which is going to probably make things worse. They're trying to expedite the membership of Ukraine into the EU, and there's something like 8 countries right now pushing for it, trying to get this membership going, and it is insane. Hey, what's going out there, Johnny? Welcome to the show. It's been a while since I've been out here, but we're back out here. We've been on Say You, and Say You has been put on hold by YouTube because of me showing war footage, not war footage, just the footage anybody else is showing, the same one that the BBC and all these people are showing. Like I said, they just want to keep me off here, but I'm back on here on this other channel. Going back to this, they want to expedite the membership of Ukraine into the EU. All right, and all this is going to do is push Russia to even move faster into Kiev, and this time they're going to take over. What they actually have done by making this announcement and attempting to do that, it's Russia going to take out. It's just going to say the heck with it. I'm not making no deal with Kiev. This is what I thought it was going to happen. This was the push all the time, was to make Ukraine into part of the EU and to also make Ukraine part of NATO. So if anything, what they're doing right now is they're pushing to make it part of the EU, and right after that they're going to push it to make it into NATO, and they think they can do all this in the next couple of days. All right, and what's going to happen is actually this is extremely dangerous, extremely dangerous right now for the people of Ukraine, because the people of Russia right now could actually go bananas and start carpet bombing Ukraine. All right. And just to assure that Europe is not going to get Ukraine, and just to assure that they're not going to be ruled under NATO. So this is just level. It just made another level here. Their attempt to get in all the countries in the EU to sign off on this thing about making Ukraine part of the EU, which would then lead to Ukraine becoming part of NATO. They have really pushed the envelope here, and I see a total disaster coming out of this one. Now, this leads me up to this 40-mile long convoy. 40-mile long convoy, but look at the. I don't want to show any war footage out here because you never know. These people gone crazy. crazy here, trying to say I can't even show them what everybody else can. But you can see the tiny video there. I mean, the pictures there. There is actually, it's like around 3 cars thick, all right, or trucks. And then it's around 40 miles long. Can you do the math on that? What do you think is the amount of vehicles there should be in a 40-mile long convoy all the way going up to Kiev? From I guess all the way back to Russia. It's really far back. That's a lot of vehicle heading into Russia. I don't know. I think that's just kind of crazy from the Russians to do that, because if Ukraine actually had the proper weapons, you could have 40-mile long burning convoy, if you know what I mean. The U.S. did it in Iraq. They did it on the border of Kuwait and Iraq. We took a convoy that was basically miles and miles long, and we fried it overnight. All right, extremely dangerous. I'm sure that they have a lot of air support over their convoy, but still accidents and things could happen, and some of that convoy could be wiped out. I hope it doesn't happen, but here's what's going on with the Russian situation. The Russians right now are being kind of by the UN's actions are actually speeding up the Russians' actions. What the UN is doing, along with NATO, is they're actually speeding up the actions of Russia. All right, Russia will, this time around, I don't see Russia trying to negotiate anything with Ukraine. They know they're attempting to make it into a EU, a European, bring them into the European Union, and Russia's not going to buy that. And Russia's not going to allow that, because they know the next step will be for them to become full members in NATO, and this will definitely go against everything the Russians trying to do right now, is to put a stop that Ukraine becomes part of NATO. So this is just going to expedite everything, and you're going to see in the next couple of days this is going to get extremely. If you think things are ugly right now in Ukraine, we're not seeing nothing. We're just seeing the beginning of this. This is going to get extremely ugly. And with the communists and the socialists in the EU, along with the globalists, all right, they're really pushing Russia into an all-out annihilation of Ukraine. And I pray to God it doesn't go in that direction. And I hope, and the good thing about, there's a little bit of good, there's something good about this, because it's a little bit light at the end of the tunnel on this one, is that a lot of the people in Ukraine support Russia. All right, there's a lot of people within Ukraine that support Russia, so they're making it easier for Russia to get over. You can say, to go through. Some of the cities in Ukraine have surrendered to Russia. Therefore, the killing should stop at that point. But of course, there are going to be a lot of infiltrators in that city from Ukrainian army, and Russia right now is probably going to be arresting a lot of people, no matter who you are. And so I don't know. See, I don't know. I have no idea what those cities' conditions are under Russian right now, under the Russian military. And I can guarantee you, it's not going to be easy. When Russia goes into a country or anywhere, they're going to come in with a sledgehammer. All right, we go in with a hammer. They go in with a sledgehammer. All right, so things will get kind of sloppy, but. Russia. From the looks of it, Russia is not carpet bombing Ukraine. They're not carpet. If it would have been that Russia was carpet bombing Ukraine, the way they make it sound in the socialist communist press, Russia would have taken over by already. Russia would have already owned Ukraine. They would have. The first thing that Russia would have hit would have been the leadership of Ukraine. They would have actually used all kind of weapon systems against the leadership of Ukraine. Russia does have a form of cruise missiles they could have used right at the very beginning of the war against the leadership of Ukraine, and they could have capitulated. Really destroy the leadership of Ukraine if they wanted to. That's not the direction they were heading into, but right now, European Union is actually pushing Russia into that direction. People got to keep in mind, Russia is not, even though it looks like Russia is the aggressor, Russia is not the aggressor. Russia is stopping the European, the communists, the socialist communists that you find in the globalists from basically blackmailing Russia by basically taking over their pipelines and then setting up a price that Russia needs to pay. And on top of that, Russia has tried to bypass, check this out, Russia has tried to bypass Ukraine by putting pipelines going around Ukraine, and the European Union has locked those out, all right, from them supplying oil into Europe. The whole thing is to bankrupt Russia. The whole. I told you guys many on my 6 Seal News Talk, my other channel. I told you guys that for a long time, I've been telling you this. That when you have communism and socialism, if communism and socialism ever made it into the White House, full-blown communism and socialism made it into the White House, Russia and China were going to be taken out next because the U.S. has fallen under communism and socialism. And this is exactly what's happened right now. And it's happened from like the very beginning. They are gone after Russia. And China's on the dinner plate for the communists also. The globalists. There are two factions in globalism. There are two parties of globalism. There used to be three parties, but the three party right now is being thrown under the bus, and that's China. All right. The two parties left right now in globalism that will attempt to annihilate each other. That is the U.S. communist socialist globalists, and then the European socialist globalists. These two right now are working hands in hands. They're working hand in hand to see how far they're going to go with this entire enchilada of trying to overtake or try to get Russia. Basically, trying to see how they're going to get Russia and China. Right now, Russia's been kind of set up to go into Ukraine. They push Russia into a corner. And Russia had no choice but to lash out and protect their interests. You see, annihilating Russia's or taking control of Russia's pipeline into Europe, this is what Russia's basically been counting on for the last 10, 15 years. They have really been building that up. And it's like if we had pipelines coming through from Alaska, instead of going through that corridor that we have made from Alaska to the United States, instead of going through it was going right through Canada, and all of a sudden Canada decides that they're going to get a big giant piece of the pie, and some government takes over. Let's say China. Here's an example. Let's say China took over Canada. All right, and all of our pipelines and gas coming from Alaska is then you have to negotiate it with the Chinese, and the Chinese tell you no, that they're going to want higher prices, and you're going to get only 1% of the revenues from that pipeline. That's basically in a nutshell what they're doing right now with Russia. All right, we own the pipelines, we manufacture the pipeline, and we're the ones basically manufacturing the oil. All right, so, but that's what happened is, in Ukraine, the government of Ukraine fell about 8 years ago. They overthrew the government with the globalists, all right, about 8 years ago. And then they put in a puppet government in Ukraine to manipulate Russia out of what they were making out of the pipeline, to basically steal from Russia as much as they can and put themselves as middlemen right there in Ukraine. And at the same time, try to undermine the Russian government. This is why Putin has put so many of them behind bars in Russia. They talk about Ukraine being a fair country, a free country. No, it's not. The last times that elections were held in Ukraine, that entire party that ran against this clown that they have now in Ukraine have been arrested. They're behind bars. Okay, there's nothing free about Ukraine. Ukraine is basically a dictatorship, communist throwback to the Soviet Union leadership is what they got in there, and they got a puppet for the globalists. That is not run by Ukraine, by that idiot in Ukraine. He's really not the guy running that country. The one that's running that country is international interests, globalists, and people from the European Communist Union, who are the most part running there, and they're filling in their pockets with millions and millions of dollars coming in from that pipeline from Russia. This is why they don't want Russia making pipelines in other directions that will bypass Ukraine, because then they're going to be left out, and these other countries such as Germany and other countries where these pipelines will come in will then make their own negotiation with Russia, leaving the middlemen of Ukraine out, who are the globalists. All right, and then they have you could say a civil war going that the Ukrainians have been feeding for a long time along the border of Russia and Ukraine. And this is a racist war. All right, this is one which you have a bunch of people in Ukraine who really hate the Russians, and Russians possibly make the majority of Ukraine. All right, so this been a war that's been going on nonstop, literally killing each other there. All right, and enough is enough. And Russia's not going to continue to get blackmailed by the globalists. And let me tell you, you are in support. If you are in support of Ukraine, Ukrainian government, then you're in support of the communist takeover of the United States, and you really, really have zero zilch idea of what's been happening in Ukraine for the last 8 years. You have no idea or even no understand the history of Ukraine, of what's been happening and what they've been trying to do to Russia. And let me tell you, China is not out of the in the clear right now. China, for the most part, I told you guys in the 6CO News Talk that China, at the beginning of the year, I told you that the communists was going to throw China. I told you that as soon as, not at the beginning of the year, actually more than a year ago, I told you when Joe Blow got into the White House, they were going to throw China under the bus, and it's exactly what's happened. China right now is being set up. All right, China's being set up to go into Taiwan. They're actually pushing China to go into Taiwan. All right, the reason they want China to go into Taiwan to do the same thing they want to do to Russia right now is economically bankrupt China to zilch and possibly trigger a civil war in China. All right, China. It's just too stupid, I think, to realize what they're being set up for to go in. China should leave Taiwan alone. Taiwan will fall to the Chinese, no ifs or buts about it, but can fall to the Chinese under their condition. With the undermining that China is doing in Taiwan, at the rate they're undermining that government in Taiwan, the political parts of Taiwan, you could say, the Chinese could take over Taiwan in 30 years or less, all right? They could undermine enough of the government in Taiwan where the government will freely, in around 20 years, possibly even a lot less, will give the country back to China without China firing one bullet. All right, China doesn't have to go insane right now to go into Taiwan. I hope that's not the case. I really would love to see the freedom in Taiwan to continue, and the people of Taiwan to continue under their own sovereignty. All right, and I wish that China could turn things around and become a free nation, take away all those monitoring stuff that they have put up, and all the stuff that they had done to monitor their people and these political prisoners out of their prisons, and become a free society for all. I wish they could really turn away from communism, and it will make China possibly the most powerful nation in the U.S. and the entire world. And Russia's basically saying no to communism is what they're saying no. But they're not going to allow now the new Communist Party of Europe, fascist Communist Party of Europe, because a lot of the European Union members are former Nazis, are former their fathers and grandparents were part, or you could say they were part of the Nazi Party of Germany. All right, they have connections to the Nazi Party of Germany. These are a lot of the members you'll see there in the European Union. All right, so so the Nazis are back in some ways, you could say. All right, but right now they're using the socialist communist media globally to make it look like Russia is the aggressor, that Russia just had nothing to do, that Putin woke up one day and was having some tea or coffee and say, you know what, let's go invade Ukraine. We have nothing else better to do. That's not the case. This has been boiling to the point that we're at right now, and it's been because they have been driving Russia into a corner. Russia is just defending their economics, defending their territory. They don't want NATO weapons parked right along the border of Russia. How would you like if the Chinese made our good friend, let's say, was Mexico, and decide to park ICBMs along the border of Mexico and Texas? How would you like that? You wouldn't like that at all. You wouldn't like to be facing Chinese ICBMs every day. You know, you could look across the border and you can see them pointing at you, all right, who are armed with nuclear weapons. You wouldn't want that, would you? So the European Union and and NATO, which are controlled by the globalist, communist, socialist, fascists, you could say, have been basically filling Ukraine with weapons. All right, tons and tons of weapons being fed in there because they're trying to protect their interest in that oil pipeline that doesn't even belong to them. It belongs to Russia. All right. Trying to blackmail Russia to give up more and more money and give them more and more a percentage on that oil. The whole thing has been, if you take out the pipelines out of Ukraine right now, if you were to take out all the oil pipelines out of Ukraine, I guarantee you there'll be no more war in Ukraine. And there will be no more attempt by the EU or even NATO to make Ukraine any kind of a member or any kind of a member to NATO. They will just lose all their interest because they're not making nothing of it. Even though they still probably push for NATO because their whole idea is to come against Russia, come closer as they can to Russia, so they can one day make a move into Russia. Russia's been a thorn in the and the side of the globalists for over 100 years. The first time that Russia basically really ran into into the globalists was around about 1917, when right about when the war was about to end. There was a big meeting in Europe. You guys ever seen the? If you look at your back of your dollar bill, if you actually look at the back of your dollar bill, you're going to see in the back of your dollar bill says the one world order. That was put back then by the globalists, the ones that we have within the United States, put that in there, the new world order. All right. Well, you see this, they put that back there a long time ago. They put almost 100 years ago. They basically put that back there. And what happened was, if you go back to around 1917, all right, right about where the first war was going to end, you had all this outbreak, this flu outbreak that basically was the one that really truly stopped that war. The Spanish flu outbreak, you could say. When they were going through all that, they decided to get together in Europe, and they told the Russians that they wanted the Russians to join them there in Europe for this new talk about global dominations. All right, and what happened was the Russians said that they were going to go on board with this, join the globalists, but they had to overthrow the Tsar of Russia. All right, and then the globalists, with their bankers and everything, and even though Europe was all destroyed, basically started to help out Russia, and they were responsible for helping Russia to overthrow the Tsar in Russia. All right. Once they overthrew the Tsar in Russia, the globalists thought that they were going to have the New World Order. And this is going back 100 years ago. And this is when the New World Order is actually they really wanted to set it up about 100 years ago. What did Russia do? Russia stabbed them in the back. Russia says, we're not going to hand you over the keys to Russia, and we're going to still be a sovereign nation, and maybe we will become the New World Order. Then what happened was, in World War II, the globalists, the super bankers and the globalists, and the same family last names, if you know who they are, all right, were involved in this one, getting World War II set to go, and they fire off World War II. As soon as they fire off World War II, Adolf Hitler went right through Poland. What was his major target was Russia. You see, Adolf Hitler's target wasn't Poland. His target really was Russia, all right, pushed by the globalists because of what Russia did to the globalists. So he wanted to take over. They thought that they had enough armament in Germany to go into Russia and take over Russia. And really, once Russia was sealed, you could say, by the globalists, then they would have brought in their one world order. Okay, that didn't work out. The Russians beat the living yang out of them. As a matter of fact, went all the way into Moscow and eliminated him. Okay, so there has been an extremely bad blood between the globalists and Russia for 100 years. All right, then came the Cold War. The Cold War was a lot of Russians. The communism is extremely bad. All right. And Russia had this communism in place, but the globalists was also using it to hype up the giant propaganda behind communism and keep their boot on the necks of the Russian government and the Russian people by not allowing the country to prosper at any point or shape. And what did they do? Since they lost Russia, they couldn't get Russia. They started to get China on board. That's where you see the development of China by the globalists. All right. Then Russia was sitting there under this Cold War all the way to the late 1980s, when they decided to move away from communism. And at that point, the globalists had released their boot on Russia, thinking that once Russia came out of communism, that the globalists can somehow make their move back into Russia to then put Russia in line for the New World Order. All right, that didn't happen either. All right, so this battle between the globalists and Russia has been going on for 100 years, and Russia every single time has given the globalists a black eye. All right. So going back only maybe about 10 years ago, whatever, 10 to 20 years ago, you could say, when Putin got in there around 1990 something, 92 I think it was, 92, 93, when Putin got in there. They thought that they were going to have it easy with Putin, and Putin, for the most part, wants nothing to do with the globalists. All right, and around around 10 years ago, Putin started to throw out the banks that were operating from the globalists. He started to throw them out, and organizations such as George Soros' organization in Russia got thrown out, and on and on and on. Many of them these globalists got thrown out of Russia, and Putin said, "No, we're going to keep a sovereign country. We're not going to join the one world order." But the problem is, by that time, you can say Putin's already started to spend a lot of money building his pipeline into Ukraine. They allowed Putin to build his pipeline into Ukraine, and at the right moment, the globalists overthrew the government in Ukraine and replaced it with their puppet government, and then blackmailed Putin, telling Putin that they were going to turn off the spigots and the fuel was not going to flow into Europe, and therefore they were going to drive Russia into bankruptcy. And Russia spent a lot of money on that pipeline. Pretty much a huge amount of their GDP was spent in building these pipelines. All right, so Russia was in a pickle. They had to concede, you could say, in some ways, to the globalists and give them what they wanted in order for the oil to continue to flow into Europe. All right, but Russia has gained strength, and Russia has made a lot of money off that pipeline, and Russia has actually been building the military from that point on. Russia has been really, really super building their military, and it's not what people think, that Russia's been building a military up in the last 10 years because they want to take on the U.S. No, it's because they want to take on Europe just like you see it today. All right, they have been planning this whole thing for a long time to take back Ukraine away from the globalists. And the globalists, of course, they had their puppet government. All their elections have been fixed. The last election that they had, the people who ran against this clown in the last election, who was basically a globalist, he's put them all behind bars. These are the people in Ukraine. He talks about freedom and he talks about free elections and all this is bull. That's all communist propaganda, socialist communist propaganda coming out of Ukraine. He is being run by a puppet. He's basically a puppet being run by the globalists, you could say, is what he is. So what you have now is you have Russia, who had no other choice. If Russia does, if they do or they don't, they get screwed either way. So Russia thought this is probably the best thing to do is just do it the old way and go take territory. And this is what you see right now happening in Russia. You see where the Russian military said, we have built up enough forces, we have built up enough equipment and the things that we need to go into Ukraine and take it over. They attempted to go into Ukraine just by taking over those two areas and making them free countries, Luhansk and Donetsk and Ukraine, making those two areas as free countries. As soon as Russia said that, as soon as Putin got off his speech on that, about 2 hours later, the Ukrainians started to shell those two areas, extreme shelling of those two areas by the Ukrainian fascist military, you could say, in Ukraine. All right? And then, of course, those two areas that Putin announced that they were free countries started to call Russia and say, we need you guys to help. But, of course, Russia knew that was, in some ways, was going to happen. It was going to give Russia an excuse to go in there. But Russia was going to go in there and sit there on the border of these two new countries without doing anything to Ukraine, but Ukraine kept shelling everybody, and Russia said, "The hell with it, we're just going to go all the way into Kiev." Okay, and this is what you have right now: is Russia basically Russia's going to divide that country in half, where the southern part will belong to Russia, all the way into possibly Romania, where they can then run their pipelines into Romania and bypass the other areas that they're going through. All right, and leave part of Ukraine there, or Russia's just going to take over Ukraine completely, install a puppet government in there that will be, you could say, well, Russia will basically rule over that government, or Russia will even bury their flag in Ukraine and say Ukraine is part of Russia, and that's the bottom line. All right. In the long run, if Russia actually takes over Ukraine, it will actually stop all the stupidity there, possibly for the next 50 years. All right. There will be no more BS coming out of that area. If Russia decides to share power there with some kind of a puppet government, it's only a matter of time before the globalists will undermine that government, and you may see the whole thing start all over again. All right. So we'll see what happens there. It's probably best off for the entire European Union, the people of Europe and Ukraine, for Russia to just basically plant their flag there in Ukraine, because they will stabilize the government. At the beginning, there will be a lot of sanctions against Russia, who really will take a piss and a dump on it, because they don't care much about these sanctions coming from Europe. And and then Russia can then start developing the country. And with time, the European Union, because of the price of oil going up and fuel going up, they will have to continue to negotiate with Russia. And now all the middlemen that were there in Ukraine will be out. So that is basically in a nutshell what's happening there. Of course, like I said, China is being set up. China is being, once Russia kind of gets kind of clear there in Ukraine or whatever is going to happen there, they're going to push China into Taiwan. And then China is going to attack Taiwan. The same globalists who are now trying to destroy Russia are going to then try to destroy China economically by trying to shut China to the world's banking community completely and possibly start supplying the Chinese factions inside China with weapons and systems to go to war with China. They may even, here's the thing about it, the globalists are so desperate for their plan, for their global domination program to work, they may even push India into China, where they may end up instigate a war between India and China. That way they can open up a major front against the Chinese, and then on top of that, infiltrate tons and tons of weapons into China to cause the overthrow of the Chinese Communist Party, which will be, for me, it would be great. They're overthrowing the Chinese Communist Party. The bad part about it, who's taking over? The globalists. They're 10 times worse than the Chinese Communist Party. So we're going from the frying pan into the fire. All right. The Chinese may not wake up to the fact that they're being set up by the globalists to go into Taiwan, and may be stupid enough, fill them themselves, you could say, to go into Taiwan and cause the problem that's going to lead the death. Basically, it will lead to the death of the Communist Party of China, and all kind of destruction will go for the Chinese. And economically, China will never reach their goal of ever becoming a world superpower. They will actually melt into the background as their cities burn to the ground. All right, this is all going to take place, basically, and also the globalists. If Putin does take over Ukraine and does keep Ukraine, the globalists will use that as to point it out to the entire world. Look, we allow communists to come in and take over these other countries. We cannot allow China to do that to Taiwan, and the globalists will then push for America to get out into an all-out war against the Chinese. Because remember, the globalists in Europe, all right, and when I said about communist Russia, I'm not. Russia is not communist. It's just a propaganda coming from the globalists and the UE and the EU. All right, Russia basically is more independent than all these other countries. These other countries have become communist. All right, but going back to the situation with China and the U.S., Russia's been the European Union globalists, the globalists in Europe, want to get the U.S. and either the U.S. and Russia or the U.S. and China into an all-out shooting war, even possibly a limited nuclear war. All right, so then they can consolidate power. This is not working for them, but this is what they want to do. Here's something that I've been thinking about in the last couple of days. The reason that you may see the White House pulling back on Ukraine or not saying that we're going to send U.S. troops into Ukraine or do any of that, and basically denying that, is there may be a possibility here that the U.S. globalist communists will want to see the communists in the EU destroy, because they know they pose a threat to the U.S. plan of 100 years. 100 years the U.S. communist globalists have been at it. Before you could say, in some ways, you could say before a lot of the European were organized and their one world government, the U.S. was way ahead of them. All right, and the U.S. always wanted to be the one world order. It does not help the citizens of the United States. We were basically being enslaved by communism and socialism. All right, if we ever fell under full blown communism in the United States. All right. But here's the thing is, now they're in the White House, they're now in charge of our military, and on and on. All right, they may want to get rid of their competition in Europe, which is the other New World Order, is the other half of the New World Order. So how do you get rid of your competition in Europe, the other half of the New World Order? You eliminate them, and you use another country to eliminate them. So maybe the U.S. will say, we'll back up. We're not even going to send our troops out there anymore, or even maybe they'll even stop supplying weapons to anything in Europe and allow Russia, and maybe even you could say flame the fires of Russia and the EU big enough where Russia would decide to attack the the EU and start putting those people 6 feet under, eliminating the competition in the EU for the one world order. Then it will leave basically the United States as the new one world order, you could say, and a lot of these other countries will be eliminated. All right, from Europe will be eliminated. Europe really is too small to really challenge Russia. If Russia decided to scale this up to an all-out war, they will basically run over Europe. All right, because Russia will carpet bomb every single city all the way up to the UK. All right, and they will really, really go out. Russia's not going to do what they're doing in Ukraine. Russia will not do what they're doing in Ukraine against Europe, of sending in all these vehicles and people and ground troops. They're really costing a lot of life of Russian troops. No, they will go on the air and they will start bombing the living yang, possibly be using small nuclear tactical nuclear weapons in Europe, and that will be the end of that. All right, the U.S. may actually back off, like I said, and allow Europe to burn to the ground. Why the U.S. New World Order becomes the powerful country, the powerful nation, and then at the right time they will try to negotiate with Russia to back off Russia, possibly all the way back to the Ukrainian border, or maybe Russia will end up keeping Poland, Romania, and all these other countries that Russia will have to go through to get into the heart of Europe. All right. And there will be some negotiation down the road on that. But at the end, the only thing that's going to come out of it will be that the U.S. New World Order, or the globalists in the U.S., will be the most powerful leaders of the entire world. And the European New World Order will be 6 feet under, and the Chinese will be scared to death of what could happen to them next if they don't fall in line with the New World Order. Then you're going to have the situation develop between Russia and the New World Order, and what they'll probably try to do is at that point is try to undermine the Russian government by removing Putin, finding a way to remove Putin and pay off enough people in Russia to overthrow that government of Putin's, and so they can then finally finalize the New World Order. All right, this is, I believe, is what the U.S. New World Order is planning. All right, they're going to throw the EU New World Order, they're going to throw them under the bus. Or the EU is going to throw the American New World Order under the bus. One of those is going to come out successful. The other one is going to be 6 feet under. All right. And they're right now trying to go at each other because the EU wants American troops to go into Ukraine. They want us to go and fight that war. Why? You got your own freaking people over there, your own troops, your own stuff. You go fight the war against Russia. Why you want to sacrifice American life? All right. This is because when the Americans go to fight against Russia, the EU will pull their troops out or won't send enough troops and support for American forces, and then we will have our personnel and equipment wiped out, weakening the crap out of us. And the EU then at the right time will make their move against Russia, that it will become extremely weak under an attack by the US. And then they will try to put Russia back into their borders and destroying Russia economically, and then they will come up as the successful country, a successful government of the world, the one world order. The Chinese again will be sitting there in China not knowing what to do next, and they will be either asked to, because basically bend over backwards to the new one world order run in the EU, or they will be economically destroyed in China. They will lock off all the contracts. They'll probably make it even illegal for anybody to make all this stuff that's been going on in China, and in the Xinjiang area where they're actually going after these Uyghurs and killing them and all this other stuff. All that stuff will be used against China. All right, stuff that they basically the globalists actually work with China to develop. They will then use it against China, throw China under the bus. And maybe because the EU globalists, if they get in charge, are the ones ruling the entire world at that point, they will then start making new laws or they'll put up new you could say rules and you could say stuff in the United Nations. They will prevent China from doing business outside their country, therefore bankrupting China. All right. And then China will probably be asked to surrender some of their weapons, such as missile systems. And before you know it, China's in a mess. And China's it's down, it's gone. And they got because they got to get rid of the New World Order. I've been telling you for a long time has to get rid of the United States, has to get rid of Russia, and has to get rid of China, and possibly even India. India, the good thing about India, it plays all sides of the table. All right, and they can manipulate India to play any side. All right, at this point in time with the government they have in India. In India, basically, they're not looking for a war on any side, but they'll basically bend over for anybody on any direction. All right, as long as you don't mess around with, as long as Pakistan doesn't get any part of India, India's happy. Uh, that's the way. I hate to say it, but that's the way it is right now. All right, so hang on one second. Hang on one second. Johnny says that the first ones to give up would be the French. you know, French. I met a lot of French, and they got a bit of a bad reputation. French had fought in World War II and World War One. France fought a lot, and they lost a lot of people. And they're fighters. Look at France right now. With their yellow jacket and all this, they have been standing up to the government and all the stuff that they have done. And it just gets them going in a little bit. I think what happens to France is, if you look at the history of the New World Order and how these foundations for 100 years have been manipulating the First World War and the Second World War, and then you look at France. France has like been caught between a hard place and a rock. All right, and it's hard for France. France politics has created a lot of problems for the people fighting wars. All right, for France, and it's not to say that people cannot fight. They're very good fighters. You could say very good warriors. You could say in France. The problem is the politics of the countries has torn up the country. All right, trying to make deals with Adolf Hitler, trying to do the same thing, and back in World War One, they basically were the ones in the front line getting slaughtered, you could say, not having the proper troops or the proper generals in place, and on and on and on. France has been is basically, you could say, the one getting the ugly stick. All right, and they have been suffering in a major way under the two major wars. They suffer in a major ways. France will be at the front line of an all-out European invasion from Russia if anything happened. And then once again, the French will be thrown in the front line, and once again, the French will suffer a lot of casualty. All right, this is why you see France sometimes you see will pull up. Okay, they will want because they know history has shown that France gets annihilated during these wars. All right, it is the people of France that have to pick up the pieces after all these wars. It is the people of France that have to take loans from the globalists and owe them everything for the rest of their life. It's the people of France that have to rebuild their countries again. It's the people of France who are dying and suffering in the streets, starving to death. And these wars are the people, the real a-holes behind these wars are not suffering. They're eating filet mignon and they're sitting at home and they're living it up. On the top of the bodies of all those people that they have basically gotten killed in all these countries. All right, the same families, you could say, the same super rich families, nothing ever happened to them. Nobody goes after them. They got enough money to pay off governments and prosecutors and anybody to protect them, that they will not get prosecuted for any of the criminal crimes that they have done by playing both sides of the war. I guarantee you right now, there are banks right now and there are families right now, these super rich families who are helping both sides of this Ukrainian war. They're helping the Russians and they're helping Ukraine, and they're egging on this entire thing, and money's being spilled over on both sides. All right, from the same people that started World War One, World War Two, and all this on. All right, it just goes on and on and on, people. It's just the way it is. Let me go back to this convoy now. I believe that the convoy could make it into Kiev. They're not going to go in like that, like the way you're seeing right now, a giant line of convoy. They'll start surrounding the city, and you may see what happened in Russia and during the Soviet Union when they took over Moscow. They see when the Germans took over Leningrad and started to bomb Leningrad all over the damn place, all right, day and night. And you may see where the Russians will pull something along those lines and start asking what Russia will do is surround Kiev. I will think they will surround Kiev. They will lock off their airspace. They will knock off anything that flies over Kiev. They will drop it. All right. They don't care where that plane drops at. And then the Russians will start asking the women and the children, possibly they'll start asking women and children to get on buses and start to evacuate the city of Kiev at that point. All right. And then once Russia does have a solid, once Russia has surrounded Kiev completely, they have completely surrounded Kiev. They will start this procedure. They will say, they first will announce a no-fly zone, and of course they will probably ignore that. A lot of the Ukrainians may end up ignoring that, and Russia will knock down all their planes or helicopters, anything they try to fly out of the city. All right. And then they will start. I'm sure there are tunnels leading out of the cities. Russia will probably dynamite those tunnels to assure that nobody's going to leave the city unless they go through Russia first, to the Russian military. All right. And then Russia will then possibly cut off the power and communication to Kiev. Okay, there'll be no more communication into Kiev, no more power, nothing will be out. They will target all their communications antennas and anything that they use for communications will be taken out. All right, the city will be blacked out. Russia will then will basically surround the city with their military troops, and Russia will continue to fight will continue a mop-up operation against the rest of the country. They will continue a mop-up operation as they surround more and more Kiev. All right. At one point, I'm sure that the Russians will ask that anybody with children or women to leave the city. All right. So start packing their stuff up in buses and start leaving the city. All right. Then they will ask the Ukrainian military, those people of fighting ages, to report to the Russian military and surrender themselves to the Russian military. All right. And, of course, some of these people will be egged on not to do that, and they won't. All right. And at that point, they're just surrounded. They're cut off. Their communications is cut off, and Russia will attempt to negotiate with those who are still remaining in Kiev for their surrender and for the basically to bring down the government. The government will be brought down. All right. If they refuse, if the government in Kiev refuse to do anything that Russia does ask them to do once Kiev is surrounded, then the Russians will have to move in there like they did in Berlin back in World War II, and things are going to get extremely bloody. Because you're looking at house to house fighting, building to building. Each building is you got to take each building one by one, and it is a waste of life for the Ukrainians who are serving a puppet government run by the globalists. If I could talk to the Ukrainians, I'll say, you're serving a puppet government. Hey, Jim, you're joining me here, man. Hey, welcome to the Say You new channel here on YouTube, because the other channel is on suspension for 7 days. Going back on this, the Ukraine, Jim, I hope you and your family are doing good, man. Thank you for joining. The Ukrainians, the best thing they do is surrender. All right, they basically not to go to war with Russia. All right, and just basically just get out of the city. They're gonna be incarcerated. They're gonna be put into holding pens by the Russians, and they may end up being there for a month or two until Russia finds out who's who and what they're doing. All right. But the thing about it is, it will go back. All right, once Russia reestablish. They take control of Kiev, and the government of Ukraine has fallen. Russia will then start talking about setting up a new election, or possibly putting in somebody that will lead the country from Ukraine, because that's what Russia will probably try to do. Try to get the people of Ukraine to start a little bit siding with them and trusting them. And Russia will start, at that point in time, Russia will have a lot of pressure from the international governments around the world. All right, to get out of Ukraine. Russia will not get out of Ukraine. If Russia loses a lot of people there in Ukraine and does make it all the way into Kiev and take Kiev, Russia is not going to get out of Ukraine. Get that through your heads. I will tell that to the international government. Russia is not going to pick up their bags and just leave. They will stay there. They will get all kinds of sanctions, and at the end, the world's government and a lot of the people around the world will see that the sanctions are hurting the people of Ukraine and are really making the people of Ukraine suffer. And little by little, because Russia has so much oil and gas, countries will start lightening up on the sanctions, and you may see where it all starts in about a year or two. You'll see some kind of normal life returning back to Ukraine. All right. You may have where the government, such sponsored by the globalists, may send in there some kind of special forces to continue some kind of a guerrilla warfare against the Russians. All right. So Russia may end up locking up that country pretty tight for a couple of years to avoid anything infiltrating their territory. All right, and Russia to try to bring control there. The Germans and other people that depend on Russian gas and oil will eventually have to continue to negotiate with Russia, and possibly that North pipeline, that North 2 pipeline, will have to be certified, and oil will have to flow into Germany unless Germany is planning an overthrow of their own government by their own citizens who are sick and tired of paying extreme high prices on fuel. And this could happen for the entire Europe. All right. So bad idea. Europe has to stabilize under you could say bring in lower those gas prices and oil and fuel prices down, and they have to start paying attention to their own economy before their entire economy crashes, and leave Russia alone and allow the fuel pipelines to continue to go into Europe. The globalists will then move their entire operation. They will then put more pressure on the Middle East to start a war in the Middle East. They will because remember the globalists have lost Kyrgyzstan. The globalists tried to go into Kyrgyzstan to cut off the pipelines that were leading into Ukraine from Kyrgyzstan, which were run basically by Russia. All right. But the Russians were waiting at the door for the globalists, and the Russians gave the globalists two black eyes. Right away, they were thrown out of Kyrgyzstan. The entire coup to overthrow the government was basically dragged down by the Russians. The Russians basically destroyed that. So they couldn't get a hold of Kyrgyzstan. So that's a blow for the globalists. The globalists are suffering two more black eyes with this, you could say, disease and medicine that they have put out to destroy the entire world's population in some ways, and they are suffering two black eyes on that. All right, the globalists still have cards on the table to play. They still got Taiwan, and they still got the Middle East. They still got Iran, and possibly try to instigate some kind of a war in the Middle East. They're not too worried about Taiwan because they want the Chinese. The globalists want the Chinese to go into Taiwan so they can then have something to destroy China, to bring about possibly even a civil war in China. All right, but in the Middle East, what the globalists want is to take control of the Middle East, and they will love to see a nuclear exchange in the Middle East where you end up wiping out all those Gulf countries, especially Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and Qatar, and anything that develops or makes fuel. They want to see those countries completely demolished, so then they can come in with their predatory lending and rebuild the country and possibly replace all the monarchies in the Middle East with their own puppet governments, and therefore take control of the fuel that the Middle East is supplying to the entire world. All right, so this is one deal. This is one of the reasons they have closed the spigots in the United States. It is basically to make only one point of control for fuel around the entire world, and that is the Middle East. This is what they're looking for. They're also looking for one point of fuel control, and that is the Middle East. All right, and they want to shut down all around the entire world their spigots, their oil, their production. They want to shut it down. All right, and only have one area so they can make it easier for the globalists to control and less politics for them to handle. All right. So what can we going back to the situation in Europe? All right. Putting those what he's up to, he knows he's up against the globalists, he's up against communists, socialists, and fascists. All right, he knows he's up against the entire world because these people control the world's media, they control the world's press. All right, so other people's opinion cannot be heard. They have actually cut off Russian TV from Europe. There's no more Russian broadcasts in Europe. Why? Because they don't want the people of Europe to hear what the Russians, their side of the story. They don't want the people to hear the Russian side of the story. This is completely fascism. What you have in Europe right now, the government that you have in Europe right now is complete fascist government, is what you have. It's a fascist government. It's a government that only wants people to hear their side of the story, and they don't want you to hear any other side of the story. All right. So the Russians cannot get their messages out to the world. They're being locked out throughout the entire world. You see a lot of their newscasts is being locked out. A lot of their messages is being locked out. And Russia's just making it's hard for Russia to argue their point on what they're attempting to do and why they're doing it when you have the globalists stuck in the middle that control the global media. All right. But that will continue for a while, and eventually that the cracks are going to appear in the wall on that, and information will come out what's really happening in Russia and in Ukraine. So what could happen here in the next 30 days in Ukraine and with the Russians? If the Russians move fast enough and they're organized, and it seems like by the looks of this convoy that they put together, they're pretty damn organized, you could say. They're going to continue to sacrifice their people. The Russians will continue to lose people because of a ground war. All right. As long as the ground war continues, a lot of Russians are going to be lost. All right. And what it's if they then for some reason scale it up to a really more like a bombing of the cities or bombing of a lot of stuff through the air, then you're going to see a step up on that, and you'll see a lot of casualty, a civilian casualty is what you see. This is what Russia doesn't want to do. All right, it is war, and you're going to have these casualties. It really sucks, but that's the way it is. You will have collateral damage. All right. For every Russian being killed right now, I can guarantee you there's maybe 30 Ukrainians possibly dying. Either they're military people or they could even be just regular Ukrainian citizens. All right, because you go after Russians, they're going to come back with you with a sledgehammer. All right, and this is more. Every time you see Russian helicopters, oh, that one got knocked out by one of the U.S. missiles, a missile that shouldn't be there. All right. And when you see this kind of stuff, then the Russians are going to hammer them even more, and you're going to see even more bloodshed spread there through Ukraine. All right, and this is because the Ukrainian military should have just said the hell with it. Let us surrender to Russia. Let us get a new government in here that can serve us better, serve the Ukrainians better, because the Ukrainians have been under this communist, socialist, fascist government for like 8 years. All right, and really literally tearing up the country. All right. And they say, let's not fight the Russians. Actually, over there in Chernobyl, where the nuclear disaster happened there in Ukraine, the Russians and the Ukrainian military are working together to secure the facility. They could have done the same thing. As soon as the Russians got in there, the Ukrainian military could have joined up with the Russian military to secure Ukraine, and all they had to do was replace the government there in Ukraine. Hey, hi, how's it going out there, Marcos? So you guys for joining us here. They could have actually done that, and it would have been a lot. It would have been a lot of bloodshed. Could have been prevented if the Ukrainian army and the Russian army would have, you could say, somehow met in the middle and say, we're not going to fight this war, and we're just going to get rid of the people who are causing all these problems here. All right, but that's not gone that way. There's a lot of people within Ukraine who are extremely racist against Russians. All right, who will fight to the end. And the government, and of course, the government continues to put out brainwashing stories about how they're the victims, and they don't say nothing about what they've been doing to Russia for the last 8 years. How they've been trying to basically blackmail Russia for 8 years over these pipelines, and how they have been responsible. Also, how they are not responsible, how they are controlled by the globalists. They haven't been talking about that. The writing. If I was right now, could talk to that clown, that comedian. In Russia, Ukraine, who's in charge of Ukraine, I would tell them, hey, why don't you pack up your bags and leave already and spare the people of Ukraine of what's going to come to Kiev? Why are you going to allow? I would love to tell the government in Ukraine, you need to surrender. You should surrender for the sake of your people. Russia's not going to stop. All right, just because you shot down 1 or 2 helicopters of Russia, whatever the deal is, and you may have killed a couple of thousands of Russians, you got to understand your army has lost thousands and thousands already. I guarantee you, of Ukrainians, and your equipment is being destroyed. And next, your city is going to be destroyed, and your people within that city, those who don't leave, are going to be destroyed. Why you want to bring Ukraine down to that level? Why you want to bring that Ukraine down to that level of destruction? All right. Why don't you just get out of Ukraine, get on a helicopter, tell the Russians you're bailing out, you're surrendering the city to the Russians, and you want a free passage to the West. Possibly fly into Poland, fly into Romania, fly into another country, pack up all your families, pack up all your government, and get out of the country, and exile yourself to another country, and free the people from the disaster that is heading their way, because there's a hurricane right now heading for Kiev, and it's beginning to surround the city. Possibly by the time I'm talking to you about this, most of that city is already being surrounded by Russia, and once the city is surrounded and the strangle noose is around their neck, it's going to be extremely impossible for those people to get out of it. All right, I'm gonna tell you right now, they're not gonna get out of it. Russia will continue to amass their troops before they make the move into the center of that city. I think Russia will continue to amass their troops along the border, and then they'll make their move. Like I said, there is a protocol that the Russians will follow to see if they can get as many people out of the city, especially women and children and older people, out of that city before Russia moves in with their troops. And I believe that they will follow that protocol before they do that. Okay, so we think things are going to get extremely ugly. I would love to tell the international press, shut up. You have been reporting lies after lies after lies after lies after lies. You know what really is going on in Ukraine between the Russians and the Ukrainians. You know what the New World Order, these globalist bastards have been trying to do to Russia, and how they've been trying to bankrupt Russia, and Russia is not looking for a war. You drove Russia into a war along with the propaganda coming from this media, you could say, machine that the globalists have put together. You people should just shut up, because by shutting up and allowing this stuff to somehow and pray for these people in Ukraine, and pray that things don't get really out of whack in Ukraine. We could spare the life of those people in Ukraine, and spare the life of a lot of people who are involved in this war right now in Ukraine, instead of freaking fanning the fuel in there. All right. I wish we could bring a peaceful solution to this, that these idiots who are in charge of Ukraine pack up their bags and left for the sake of Ukraine. Just get on the plane and leave already, and ask the Russians for a corridor where they can leave, where they won't get shot down, and allow the Russian military not to march into Ukraine with their weapons drawn, but let them march through there like they basically, in a peaceful way, take over the government buildings, and let the citizens go about their daily life as the government there goes through a transition. And you'll see where the Russians will then start putting in the government they want to put in place, or either that or just keep the country. All right. For the long terms, like I said, it's probably better off for Russia to keep the country, and the reason is it will stabilize Ukraine. And in the short term, it will hurt Russia economically, but in the long term, it will benefit Russia, because they won't have to be worried about another overthrow of another government in Ukraine, because this time it will be under the rule of Russia, and Russia will not, of course, is going to prevent that. All right. So there are some benefits there and if Russia does take over Ukraine, and they do plant their flag there and they say this is part of Russia, like I said, economically they will suffer in the short term, but in the long run they're going to do better. But it will also improve the situation in Europe. Europe will get a lot better. Europe's oil prices will begin to stabilize, and you may see Europe prices of oil and fuel start coming down, and gas start coming down, as more and more countries will start dropping sanctions against Russia. There's this whole talk about the banking system, this Swiss system that the banking systems use around the entire world, and they basically are trying to close Russia to their banking overseas. The problem with that is called China. All right, why it may not work. The Chinese, for the last about 10 years, they've been working on their own Swiss system. All right, Swiss system is not like a PayPal. All right, it's not like the money's being transferred from one account to another account. It is a messaging system. All right, it is a communication system between one bank and another bank, and it's basically to notify the other bank of a credit being given or taken or whatever the deal is. But it doesn't transfer money. But it is used by all major banks around the world. Use the Swiss system to move money around, but not to the Swiss system itself does not deposit or take money and move money around. They don't do that. They're basically a messenger system. All right, but they've been talking about locking out Russia and removing this system from them to hurt Russian banks. The thing is, the Chinese, because the last around 10 years since the U.S. has been after China because of the South China Seas, the U.S. also talked about doing that to China. So China started to develop their own Swiss system. So what we're seeing, there's economic experts and other people saying, is that Russians will turn their banking system their banking system will go through China, and China still has access to all the banking systems around the world, and China will have their own SWIFT system that will be used by other banks. Because of countries around the world being strapped on money, and especially because of what's been happening for the last couple of years with this disease, all right, a lot of these economics are kind of screwed up. They will work with the Chinese SWIFT system, all right. So you see, it makes it easier for them to join the Chinese SWIFT system. So here's what the whole thing is going to be. It's going to be an inconvenience for Russia to move away from the European SWIFT system, banking system, to the Chinese system. It's just going to be a little bit inconvenient for the Russians to do it, but in the long run, it's really not going. It should not affect Russia, and Russia will still be able to do their banking globally without a problem. And still, the same players will end up, because bankers are the Illuminatis, and they will have to make business with Russia sooner or later and get money and do the transfers they need to do for their deals that they make. All right, so that's just going to go on. So it's really, you've seen a big deal made about that from the socialist communist press that we have in the West. How they talk about the Swiss system taking down China, taking down Russia, economics. Bull. That's just a bunch of malarkey. They're basically telling you something they know you don't understand or know anything about. All right? And then you go into a panic thinking, oh my God, Russia's going to get economically destroyed. Now they're going to launch all their nuclear missiles against us. Bull. That's not the way it is. All right? Also, this talk about Russia and nuclear missiles, I think you really got to be extremely mad, and that's what that actually is an acronym. All right, mutual assured destruction. That's something that came back from around the late 50s. Somebody put that together and called it mutual assured destruction. The Russians agree on it, the Americans agreed on it, and Europe agree on it. That if anybody launched nuclear missiles against another country that has nuclear missile, you were going to annihilate both countries. You might as well take the missiles and shoot them straight up into the air and let them land on top of you again. All right, that's why there would be no nuclear war unless things go extremely insane, and then there will be a nuclear war. That the possibilities still, even though under the conditions that we're in, of an all-out nuclear war are extremely slim. This happening in Europe. The Europeans do not want to. Let me tell you, you don't want to face Russia that has like around 1,200 nuclear missiles, and God knows what they have out there in space. All right. You don't. If you're in Europe, you wouldn't want to face that. You can sit there all day long talking your stupid propaganda about nuclear weapons, but in reality, you don't want nothing to do with nuclear war. All right, because you know it will bring about the end of Europe as we know it. All right, the U.S. in some ways may be spared, but not too much, because we will end up destroying Russia, and Russia will destroy us, and somewhere along the way, the Chinese will be caught in the middle. That's basically what you have there in a nutshell. How am I subscribing this channel? It's because here's what happened to you. Somebody's asking me how they ended up being subscribed to this channel. This channel used to belong to China Exposed. That's my channel. That was still my channel. The thing is, I haven't used that channel for 3 years. All right. So I ended up changing the name of Say You from China Exposed to Say You, which is the website that I have. That basically it's like a Twitter, Facebook website that allows you to go in and put up all your stuff in there, and even view all the news, and even see this live broadcast right now on that website if you want to. So the name was changed from China Exposed to Say You, but it's still me. It's just me changing the name over to the website that I have, because I wasn't using China Exposed. All right. It doesn't mean that I'm not going to talk about China here and Say You. I'm talking about the same thing that I will talk about under China Exposed and a lot of the Chinese stuff. Right now, because of what's happening in Russia, this is what I'm talking about. All right. If it was the Chinese, I'll be talking about the Chinese. All right. But that's why you got to your channel is different, but it's still the same thing. All right. The problem is on 6CO News Talk, okay, the other channel that I used to do all this, I had been stopped by YouTube from broadcasting for 7 days. All right, they said something along that the video that I remember, I put out a video. It was some music, and I put down some of the planes flying over Ukraine. I put down some of the tanks that were there in Ukraine. There was no dead body shown, nothing bloody shown. It was only some of the equipment that was being used. The same thing that the BBC CNN, Fox, and all the major media, the same videos that they're showing, the same exact videos, I put together like a couple of them together and put some music in there, and I asked you guys to say a prayer for these people. Hang on one second. I got something turned on there. All right. At the end of the video, I asked you guys to make a prayer for these people, and basically I put it on writing. I don't even do any moderating on that video, say anything on that video. But YouTube came back to me and gave me a strike on that. And it's something along that I violated communist community guidelines, and I don't know what the hell they're talking about because there's thousands and thousands of people putting out exactly the same stuff that I put out. How did that violate anybody? So I feel like I'm being silenced. That they don't want me telling the side of the story of what's really going on in Ukraine, and they try to, you could say, black me out for 7 days. All right. But I'm back. I'm back here on Say You, talking to you guys. I might not be there. I'll have to wait 7 days to get back on on 60 News Talk. For the last couple of years, I've been thinking about, because all the damage that they have caused against Say You, they have damaged. They have destroyed that channel. All right. In order for me not to say anything, I'll talk about it. I may decide that Say You may become the new future channel. Where I'm broadcasting. And move all my activity here, hopefully, and maybe move all my members over here to Say You, so we can start fresh on a whole brand new type of channel. A channel that already has the website and has everything set to go, has a Twitter, Facebook website that anybody can use and is free to use and express their freedom of speech. All right, so I've been thinking about that for a while, and now I think YouTube pressed enough buttons to actually get me into that direction to do what I did in the last 24 hours, and that's to change one of the channels I had to Say You, and this is what you see right now, is Say You. All right, so we may be coming here more and more often, and we may end up, maybe the end of 60 News Talk may come to an end, and you'll see us migrating over here to Say You. This may happen if I can get all I got 300. I call them the 300 because the algorithms in that channel they have put on top of that channel only controls the public up to 300 to 600 views only. That's all you ever going to get there. It's between 300 to 600 views. That's it. You'll never get the views that I used to get before. I used to get 10,000 views, 20,000 views per video, and up to even 100,000 views per video, and that will never ever be seen again over there on Say You because of what they have done with the algorithms and controlling that channel. All right, and so the channel will never get more than 300 to 600 people viewing that channel. That's it. That's the bottom line. Somehow they manipulate it. Nobody else sees it after that. And other channels talking pretty much similar to what I'm talking are getting hundreds and 10,000s of views. Also, the channel's been completely demonetized by them. All right, and even Super Chat has been taken away, and they have really done whatever they can to damage as much as they can of that channel. All right. And they even actually label my stuff as dangerous contents. Why? Because I get people to think out of the box. That's dangerous to them. It is dangerous to communist, socialism, and fascism when somebody comes along and gets people to think out of the box, to get out of the coma that these people have you, and to get you released from this coma, to release the handcuffs of freedom, you could say, in your mind, to get... It's basically me coming into a prison that has a bunch of zombies who have been handcuffed. All right, and I come in there and I pull and jank those handcuffs off of your mind, you could say, and I release your mind to think in different ways and see things from a different point of view. The globalists hate that with a passion, because the whole idea of these globalists and these tyrannical corporations and these fascist Nazis, communists that we have around the world is to control your mind. What I'm doing and doing the complete opposite. I'm releasing your mind, providing freedom of thought to your mind. So I am complete contrast of what they're trying to do, and for that I'm paying the price, and for that they got their boot on my neck. All right. But I'm gonna continue to. Well, you guys, if you guys can support me here, that's what I'm asking. I'm asking for some support, some donations, please, some donations. I really do need them. Some help here. I will stay doing this. I had, last year we went through Say You. Say You came down to the wire of being renewed for another year. And it was, thank God, some people stepped it up there at the end and gave enough donations to keep that channel going for another year. I hope you guys will do the same thing, not only for that, for here, and will continue to support this channel and the work that I'm trying to do here and trying to free the mind, you could say. Anyway, people, thank you guys for everything that you have done. I'll see if I can get back here Possibly tomorrow around this time, I'll do another live broadcast. Maybe if I can get enough support here financially, so I need some support monthly or financially. I got Patreon, I got YouTube. I mean, Patreon and PayPal. I will continue to do this like a daily show out here, and maybe, like I say, you won't see me no more on Six Seal News Talk live shows. You may see all the live shows maybe being broadcast here on Say You. I just got to find a way to move those people from Six Seal News Talk to move over here to Say You. It's not going to be easy. A lot of people don't like to move. But let me see if they move over here and we start developing this channel. And it's also tied to the website, saysayu.com. Anyway, God bless you guys. Let's pray. If you missed all this video, you should go back and see this video from the very beginning once it's archived, because there's a lot of great information you may not be aware of, and what's going to happen in Ukraine and how the Russians are going to handle it. You don't know. There's a lot of stuff in there that I talked about today you may not know about. I will recommend you go back there and see the video again. And also go to saysayu.com, because a lot of great members there are posting great videos that you won't, it's hard for you to see, because those sites are also being, algorithms are also manipulating those sites. That's why a lot of times you don't see them, even though they're coming back from the same source. Okay, a lot of these sites, go in there. There's news clips, there's videos, there's people doing commentary. Saysayu.com is like a Facebook, Twitter type of deal, and you can go in there and you can operate it almost like Facebook. You can put up your photos, you can put up your video links that you have, all kind of stuff. And either you can become a member. The membership is free, or you can just sit there and look at it. Okay, look at what's being posted on there. And now we're going to have this live broadcast. Say You. Hopefully, I will be doing this live broadcast. Maybe if I can't, maybe I'll be doing it every day. I'm not sure. Let's see the kind of support that I get from you people, because I really depend on your feedback and your support to make a decision if I want to do that live every day over there. So anyway, God bless you guys. Thank you for everything, and I hope to see you hopefully back either today, tomorrow, or maybe even if something breaks out today in Ukraine. Who knows? Maybe I'll even be back today. All right. God bless you. Thank you for everything, and I will see you. Bye bye now.